Ferrari F40, one of the great supercars of our generation.
many were built?
And by our generation, I mean the previous, to be honest.
Yeah.
How many did they make?
But we don't like any of the
1,311.
We don't like any of the supercars in our generation, so we're going to go back to the previous. Anyway, so one of them crashed in the UK. It was on a wet road, a cold day, and so the driver floored it. It's being said that it was a mechanic driving. Whenever one of these things happens, it was always someone else driving, which I find interesting. Either that's because someone else doesn't know how to drive. You know, the last crash of an F40 was in a tunnel in Germany. Do you remember this? And it was someone driving a car from like Mechatronic or something.
Yep.
Well,
that was one of their employees.
The Gas Monkey Garage F40, same thing. A mechanic was driving the car.
And so then the Lando Norris one, so that happened. The car in the UK flips over, and supposedly it's the highest mileage F40 in the world. Who knows? And then in Monaco, footage has just appeared of Lando Norris, who's apparently another Formula One driver.
From McLaren.
We don't know. He's got an F40, and someone crashed it, but apparently not him again. But who knows? Spun it into a barrier.
You should be a bigger fan of him. He also he has some very serious cars. A Miura, Carrera GT.
He's my
F40.
favorite F1 driver.
He's got some good stuff.
And I only because of the road cars that he has, and I know nothing about him. I've never seen him drive.
He's a very good driver.
So, but anyway, F40s keep crashing. What are we going to do about this? Kenan, over to you.
Well, don't floor it when the road is wet. Good start. You know
That was
F40
wild. So when I take my Carrera GT out, which has traction control but not stability control, even then I am incredibly careful when it's wet and cold. I drove it on Christmas Eve this year, and it had like misted and it was chilly, and I was very cautious. And watching, I would never floor
Never
it.
in a million
And
years.
watching that video in the F40 where the dude floors it on a wet road, I'm sitting there like, were you trying to?
The F4
would never. It's impossible for me to explain.
The only time you can floor an F40 is when you're in fifth gear at low RPM and the turbos aren't working.
I think you can floor one when the tires are warmed up. My suspicion in the Lando crash, just watching it, is that the tires were cold.
Probably.
The car wasn't quite going straight, but you can see that he steps on it, and my suspicion is that road is not that far to Monaco. The car didn't have enough time to warm up. Now, the Lando car was not heavily damaged. I've actually seen pictures of it over the last month or so
Just the
driving
rear
around
bumper.
damaged. So I think the accident happened like a while ago. But my assumption is that in both cases, it was cold tires. The car has no aids. It might be an old car, but it's still 480 horsepower rear-wheel drive car with no driver aids.
Yeah, I think the other thing to take in, so I mean, you learned your lesson earlier. Like the Ford GT is kind of a handful.
I almost wrecked the Ford GT once, probably 6 months into owning it, on an on-ramp, cold tires, dead straight. I floored it, and the car got squirrely, and I barely saved it. This was in Orange County.
I think there are a couple things to take into account. One is like you still have to show these cars a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Like when it says there are no driver's aids, people are like, "Oh, that's so cool." It's like, no, that means there's nothing to help you.
Yep.
So you are at your own risk.
Yep.
Swim, safely. The other thing I think is that it also showed, and you sent some other videos to our friend group, though, it shows how quickly.
Yeah. That
It goes-
812 video in London, I think, is like the world-changing video, because if you watch that, you can tell instantly just how fast. And that's a cold tire video, no question.
What happened in the video?
So there's a video of a guy in an 812 super fast. You might be familiar with this car. He's going straight on the road in London, looked like a cold London morning, as they all are.
Yep.
And he gets on the throttle, straight line, steering wheel straight, and the car just snaps.
And he's going maybe 40.
Yeah, and it's
stability control, surely. And
stability, traction
Probably
control.
it was off. Something he probably was off, is my guess.
maybe.
Yeah.
However,
off.
the point is, it can happen really fast. You got to, with performance cars like that, you got to roll under the throttle. You got to wait until the tires are warm, and you just have to be damn careful. And if you have any situation where you're able to like find an empty parking lot that's privately owned and figure out some limits, that day we did at Thermal was tremendous, or wherever it was at Chuckwalla, was tremendously instructive for me. I learned limits and non-limit. The limits were actually further than I thought. I'm cautious because the cars are so valuable. But you can't, this stuff.
Well, the other thing, keep in mind, Lando Norris is a young Formula One driver, and he lost it.
Well, maybe. Supposedly he wasn't driving.
Yeah.
Allegedly. But even so, the car is also no power steering. It's hard to correct. It's a big steering wheel. It's hard to, there's a lot with an F40 you have to take into consideration. The brakes aren't that great also. So
Brakes are bad.
So you just have to show these, especially the old cars, you really have to show them respect. So please drive your F40s carefully.
Yeah, it's interesting.
We can't lose F40s.
I'm not looking for an F40.
But man, look at that picture.
If someone out there has a cheap F40, you call me.
Oh, he keeps saying
I'm
this.
talking about the wrecked one, maybe. Call me up. My number is 608. No, I'm kidding. That's Filippo. All right.